Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Again, thank you for joining us for another edition of our free podcast. It can be heard on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. We are excited to have children's author Jodi Dee. She is an award-winning author and a mother of three with more than 20 years of experience in early childhood and education. Jodi has a Bachelor of Arts in History and Psychology and a Master of Education from Clark University. She is a passionate advocate and teacher of self-love, emotional maturity, early childhood education, and empowering children to learn through creativity, independence, and self-exploration and discovery. Jodi's books have won several awards in multiple categories, including the Purple Dragonfly Book Award, Moonbeam Children's Book Award, National Indie Book Award, International Book Award, American Fiction Award, and Next Generation Indie Books Award, and many more. Jodi, thank you so much for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids. We're excited to talk to you about your wonderful book, so thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, first of all, let's talk about your background as a child. Were there any particular books that you grew up that you loved, inspired you? Were there any particular authors that inspired you to become the great children's author you are today?
You know, I was lucky. So I grew up in an early learning center, a preschool that my mother started when I was probably around 2. So that's where the book Create a Home of Learning originated from. But I grew up in an environment that had so much opportunity for play and exploration and discovery. I mean, we had workspaces in the home. My mother was on the cutting edge of early childhood education and development. And to the book question, we used to have a bookmobile actually come to our house. And I don't know if they still have them, but bookmobiles were mobile libraries in this big kind of trailer type van, and it would come stocked with books every week to the preschool. So I was able to go in and pick out a book or two every week. And so I had a love of books even back then. As far as a particular author, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously Dr. Seuss was a big one when I was a child, and I loved the rhyming and the rhythm of the stories and how words were kind of like a symphony when you read them. My true favorite author was Michael Crichton, actually, as I got older into my teen years. And I loved how he merged nonfiction into his fiction writing. And he did a lot of research on all his topics before he wrote about them, like Jurassic Park and Sphere. So he was really my favorite author.
I love how you described Dr. Seuss, a symphony of words. That's brilliant. So based on your educational background, which is significant, is this what propelled you to go this particular route as far as education, all the different opportunities you give to people on your website, which is jodidee.com. I took a significant look at it this morning and went through it, and it appears that you have quite a bit of books that adults and children could learn from. Is that based on your background? Is that the route you wanted to take?
You know, I think that growing up, I felt like I had so much more opportunity than most children, and I guess most people. My parents were kind of both entrepreneurs. And even though we didn't have a lot of money, they kind of dedicated their lives to creativity, especially my mother with the children. So I grew up in a home, and it's funny, even today with my children, I want children to have the freedom to run around and explore and just get in touch with that magical side of life, that enchantment of just being alive. And I only started writing, I mean, I started writing when I was very small, a lot of kind of self-reflection and self-awareness. I was really into self-help, and Dr. Wayne Dyer was one of my favorite inspirational speakers and writers at that time. And but then when I had children, they say when you do something for 10,000 hours or plus, it makes you a master in something. So reading books to my children, same back to the bookmobile concept. I loved getting a new book every week. Like it was really like Christmas morning for me. And so I carried that over to my children and going to the library. So we used to get a bag full of books every week. And this was even before they could read. I mean, they would just immerse themselves in the beautiful photos and illustrations and the stories. And my middle daughter is actually severely dyslexic, and she was the one who spent the most time with books. So I realized at that time that, it wasn't just about reading. It was about this enchantment with, having an imagination and being able to travel in your mind to places. And so after reading, books for, well, I don't know, I guess 10 years, 3 books a day times 3 kids and so on, I figure I logged my 10,000 hours to become a master. And then I started just having these ideas of stories and characters. And I wanted to bring real stories. Like I wanted children to read stories that kind of weren't this fantasy of superheroes and this escape from what life really is. I feel like a lot of times we don't address just everyday problems for children and everyday social circumstances that we all find ourselves in. Feelings are relative, and feelings are what make being human kind of that's the beauty of being human is the ability to feel. I think it was Cummings who made that quote. But for me, I wanted children to have stories that they could relate to just on an everyday kind of thing. Like The Little Green Jacket is about donations and the culture of giving. And we have such a sharing world and community locally and even globally. And it's always missed in the media. Media tends to be sensationalized and fear driven and all this. I can't even turn on the news anymore, but so I wanted stories that addressed real life situations and just kind of found the magic in everyday life.
You made a good point there. It's hard to turn on the news. I haven't looked at the news in such a long time. So to me, as you said, it's fear driven, the media, and it's necessary to have books like yours. Let's go over some of your books. I looked on your website. You have some really wonderful offers for readers, parents, and children. There's a 6-book bundle that it's only for $29.99. What's in the 6-book bundle?
So I have my first story, which was The Dirt Girl. The Dirt Girl is about a little girl who goes to school, and she's very different. She's kind of like I guess we used to call them flower children or earthy crunchy, but she's very in tune with nature. And she makes her own clothes, and goes to school with dirt on her face and on her hands, and not dirty, but she's kind of like a gardener. And they all think she's strange because her clothes are so different, and she's just very unique. And they all tease her and ignore her and kind of just alienate her from the groups. So she just plays by herself until one day she has her birthday. And then there's this magical twist when they come to her house and they see how she lives, that it's this very, again, my favorite word, magical and enchanted place. So I can't ruin the twist of the story and tell you what happens, but she ends up becoming the most popular girl in school. And then The Little Green Jacket, I love all my stories, but The Little Green Jacket is one that really showcases this concept of hand-me-downs. And I don't mean in the sense of, there's this idea, or people think that donations just go to the poor or homeless. And really, I wanted to change that dynamic or that paradigm that people think, because when I was growing up, a bag of clothes from a cousin or from anyone, back when we were younger, we didn't have the same luxury that we have today of so much on demand, whatever we want, we kind of consume. But back then we would get a bag of clothes and use it for dress up or just for new clothes for school. And it was the greatest thing. It was like winning the lottery. So, and even when my children grew up in a much more privileged life, even when they were small, we would still recycle. We would still do donations to each other, not just handing down to the poor. So this idea of consignment and renew, reuse, and recycle is really important to me. So the little green jacket is, this jacket travels, and there's two voices in the story. So LETRS, Dr. Tolman and Dr. Moats licensed the little green jacket to use in their trainings with teachers for teaching teachers how to do train for reading and for literacy trainings. So there's two voices in this story. The protagonist is actually the little green jacket, but the little green jacket tells its side of the story while the children are having their own experiences. So the jacket kind of travels through the different lives of various children, and it goes up and down demographic. So I try to break that conception that, you know, clothes only go down. This jacket actually goes up and down, and it ends around the world after a natural disaster based on true events. So I love that story. It's also a seek and find, so kids can find recycle symbols in the book. And then the Ford book Jesse series is about a little boy who changes color based on how he feels. And I love my Jesse. And it's really funny when these books with him changing color on the covers, when kids walk by. I was at a show last weekend, and they kept taking the books off the shelf. They kept walking away with the Jesse books. It was the cutest thing because it resonates with them. I think that he changes color. You know, they identify with this idea that, whoa, he's mad. He's really red, you know. So Jesse is a story about, it's really just, he has normal everyday situations, and it's a social and emotional toolkit for parents or teachers to use for children to start recognizing self-awareness and addressing the feelings that they may have that they don't know what to do with, especially anger. You know, a lot of times, especially boys are told not to feel, and even kids in school, sit still, be quiet, you know, don't act up. And so I think Jesse is an important series to help with younger children learn social and emotional development. And then the other book, The Creator Home of Learning, I mean, this was kind of like a master class in a book. This was a labor of love. So like I said, when I grew up in the preschool, I learned through osmosis and just absorbed every facet of early childhood by being in the environment constantly. Like, I loved being in the preschool. My siblings, not so much, but I was just really drawn to the freedom and ability to explore. And so I helped my mother. I mean, we used to fill baggies with treats, and I made Play-Doh and facilitated activities. And so if you imagine growing up in a preschool, I was working there since I was probably 7 years old in all areas of it. So I kept telling my mother, because my mother, again, is on the cutting edge. She's dedicated her life to early childhood. She just wrote a bill for the state of Massachusetts to try to get funding for early childhood programs, private programs. It's a huge problem in our country that there's lack of funding. And a lot of them actually went out of business for the pandemic. But so she, you know, I kept saying, Mom, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And it just wasn't in her cards. And then I had children, and I just naturally implemented these techniques into my home. And so I set up my dining room like a small preschool, and I set up the workspaces that most accredited centers across the country do. I mean, they do it on a larger scale and part of a more academic framework curriculum. But I used to have, and so I didn't even know I was doing anything different. I just knew the right toys to buy, like types of manipulatives. And I just inherently was attracted to toys that I knew were open-ended and allowed for learning and targeted their developmental domains. And so I started having play dates with other moms, and they say, how do you have 6 kids in here and they're not fighting? They're not fighting over toys. I'm like, well, I don't know. And then I started to realize, oh, this is why. So the interesting part in this book is, if you look at the photos, you actually see my children growing in front of you, because all these pictures, I didn't have a smartphone when my daughter was born. I mean, those are what, within the last 5 years, the photography that we're able to do. And so a lot of my photos are just old, you know, I wish I had more, but that's what's in this book, is you see them grow, and you see them using the tools and techniques in this book over the course of 10 years. So they grew up not knowing any different either. So it'll be interesting to see what they do when they have children. But so I wrote this book, and it was really, like I said, a labor of love. It's like a master's class, probably a master's degree for someone. And interestingly, an audience that I didn't realize would really benefit is the private home care providers, the people that have 4 or 5 children at home. I mean, they watch children, it's like a private daycare kind of. And so a lot of them are starting to buy the book and using these tools for their daycares, which was interesting because I really wrote this book for parents. I wanted parents to know that they could do screen-free play and keep their children occupied for a long time without needing to put them in front of TV or iPads. And that's kind of become the new modality of babysitting and keeping your kids quiet is devices, which just, it sends shivers through my body when I see this in restaurants and just on a general basis. And I get it, restaurants are really tough to have kids, but I used to bring a bag of toys, like a bag of crayons and marker and things to bring with them so that they had things to keep themselves occupied. I mean, children are just sponges for information, and they just have this burning fire of energy inside of them that needs to be expressed, and we squelch that, and it makes me so upset. I just want children to, I think it would help the world as a whole if children could stay in that state and not be so suppressed.
Right. Right. I think we've come a pretty long way in that regard. You mentioned something that resonated with me, which was boys' feelings. You weren't supposed to have feelings as a boy. You weren't supposed to cry. At least that was in my family.
Right.
In fact, if you cry, you got a whack in the face.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and it only led to more crying. But so have you seen it? You've seen progress in that particular point as far as for the boys? I think we're a little bit more open now, right? For people to show their feelings at least.
I mean, there's always steps forward and step backwards. So I think it's definitely a better environment. We're more aware of feelings, but I wouldn't say that we're anywhere close to managing those feelings. I think that, the bullying phenomena and this concept that's kind of exploded as a concept has really created this victim mentality instead of empowering children, self-love, and advocating and speaking your voice and communicating, setting boundaries. Like, I think that that's such a huge missing piece in our culture. And I mean, I can only speak from what I see with my children and their friends, but I still see this suppression of truth that I think needs to come out. And I mean, adults do it too. Adults, even on Facebook, we don't allow each other just to be who we are. And it's like, we can't agree to just have differing opinions. And who cares and I always tell my children, like, and this is Jessie is part of this, because one of the things, and actually the Dirt Girl as well, because her clothing was very different than most children. And I would say to my kids, I'm like, listen, you don't have to like my dress. It's okay. Like, you don't have to like what I wear. And I'm going to give you permission to not like it. Right. And I can still like it even if you don't. And that's what needs to happen even with adults. It's like, okay, you can like it, I don't, but we don't have to fight about it. Like, for me, it's the law. I call it the law of allowing. Like, we just allow everyone to be in their own space and like do their thing, as long as you're not hurting someone else. Like, if I'm not hurting you and I'm not being mean to you, I don't like that outfit. It's okay. But it doesn't mean that I'm bullying you because I don't like it. You know what I mean? It's like, we're not allowing ourselves this individuality. Like, we're pushing for individuality, but at the same time, we're trying to make everybody stop saying the truth. It's like this weird dynamic. Yeah. So I think there has been progress. I mean, I definitely am grateful that there's awareness of feelings, because I've always been in that zone. When I was younger, I actually went to Al-Anon meetings because I just was drawn to this self-help culture and the truth of oneself. And I just wish people had that platform where they could just say whatever they wanted to. And it's almost like, we say a lot of things that we don't necessarily really mean. It's like, we just need to process it. We just need to get it out. And we need an environment where it's supportive and someone is like, okay, I'm going to let you vent. I'm going to let you just get it out. And then let's make a decision after that. Instead, we have all this bickering and fighting, and the Democrats, Republicans, it's like, oh my God, it's like, it's like, okay, you like Trump, you like Biden, who cares? Like, it's okay. Like, it's like, why are we fighting over this?
Yeah, we've learned to certainly now there's a certain level of disrespect for people, and I think Facebook and Twitter, and I use the platforms and everything for my books and everything like that, but it is toxic. And as you mentioned, and it's sad that we can't disagree without like being at each other's throats.
Yeah. And then the other thing is the disagreement always escalates into these personal attacks.
Yes.
It's like, why can't we just have a normal discussion? Okay, why don't you like Trump? And I'm using that because that's the most recent topic. That's the most abstract, but you like Trump. Okay, you don't like Trump for those reasons. I can accept that. I can understand that. And here's why I do. Or, it's like, okay, well, then that's good. But I don't hate you, and I'm not going to unfriend you, and I'm not going to disown you as a family member.
Wow, it's bad out there, because you see like even on these dating sites, people say, if you love Trump, bypass me.
Yeah.
If you love Biden, bypass me. I'm thinking, wow, that's what we've come down to now. We're determined. So we've made judgments on everybody based upon who we're voting for now at this juncture. It's sad. Very sad.
That's what I mean. It's like where we want to allow this individuality and this autonomy and ability to be whoever you are. But at the same time, we're segregating ourselves even more, creating more and more categories, more and more judgment. And I don't get it. It's like, and I have this conversation with my kids, not to bring up a heated topic, but like Black Lives Matter, like I get it, but at the same time, it's like, why can't all of us just matter? And all of us, and I'm not undermining the history of that. So that's not my point in this. My point is, like, I tell my kids, I'm like, yes, I agree with that. And LGBT lives matter. And, everybody's lives matter. So let's move to a new modality of this law of allowing that you can do, your identity is whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be these boxes. And now we're segregating each other into those boxes. So anyways.
Right. I mean, be who you are, love who you are. I think that's the message I'm getting. Respect the other person, who they are as well. So,
exactly. And they can love themselves, and I can love you for being different. Like, we can all be in love.
Yeah. Now you just signed with APG Sales and Distribution, and they're going to be selling and distributing your books to retail stores in the US and Canada. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, and you also have 2 new titles slated to release in 2022. Why don't you talk a little bit about those particular books? Obviously, you can't give away the plot and the story, but just an idea of what these books are about.
Well, again, my topics always kind of revolve around the same thing, but my new children's book is going to be Yes, I See You. And it's about a little girl who can heal others by touching them. So when she touches them, she kind of sees their pain and their struggle. And by her witnessing this and being compassionate and just this presence of her, letting them be who they are, they're healed. And this burden is now lifted from them. So she goes through different people's lives who have different situations again. And every time she heals them by her compassion. So it's actually going to be more of like a prose poem than it is a story. Although I may change that, we'll see. But right now it's actually, it's a poem throughout the story, but the illustrations are phenomenal. I have a really great illustrator. She's actually from Iran. I tend to find illustrators from all over the world for some reason. My illustrator for Jessie was Japan. My illustrator for the Dirt Girl was Colombia. And my illustrator for the Little Green Jacket was the US. So.
Isn't it amazing how we're finding illustrators from all over the world and so many talented ones? Yeah, one of our first illustrators was from Romania, and then our next one is from Cuba. I mean,
fantastic.
Yeah, and there's so many talented illustrators and children's authors. When I first started this podcast almost a year ago, I figured, well, I don't know how long this can go, how many authors I got to find. There's so many talented authors, so many talented illustrators like yourself, bringing wonderful messages. Now, what I like is if you go through your website, jodidee.com, you also offer coloring pages as well as workshop pages. So that seems to be an extension of what you're trying to do, and it seems like you're an extension of your mom in many ways.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think I've absorbed everything that she's done. I mean, that's what the goal is, right? To bring what we have from prior generations forward to the next generations with our own piece. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that I want to support educators as much as I can. So the lesson plans that I had Dr. Tolman actually create lesson plans for the Little Green Jacket. She's going to help me do them for the Dirt Girl. And those are free resources. I just want educators to have support and tools that they can use in the classrooms because they do enough work as it is. So to alleviate any of that work that they have to do at home, that I can help them and provide them with a week of lesson plans for a book, I'm happy to do it. So anything I can do to support them. And it doesn't cost me anything, it's just time. And then there's coloring pages for all my books. I make sure that I have coloring pages for parents, and even parents can use the lesson plans.
Yeah, we found right in the pandemic, or even before that, the coloring pages for adults, coloring books for adults is very therapeutic.
Yeah.
For people. So that was a big thing as well. Children's books sold a lot during the pandemic as well.
Yeah, I think sales.
Yeah.
I was reading that sales in Publishers Weekly have gone up significantly for all publishers. But, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's an interesting issue happening now with the supply chain and demand is that there's a shortage of books.
Yes.
And so for Christmas, there's a shortage of toys and they're scrambling to get printed product because they're not able to get it from people who have products, people who have books.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for us, someone like me who's just launching with APG, that I did have inventory that they're going to fill the gaps with authors that have inventory, if the ones that they wanted aren't available. So you may see new titles, which is exciting for new authors because you may see new titles that you otherwise wouldn't see in stores like Costco and BJ's and Walmart's.
That makes sense because I have a novel coming out in March. I just spoke to my publisher, and he says he's had to delay his books because of a shortage of paper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and
a lot of them were printing in China, and they can't get their books here.
Exactly. Vietnam as well. Vietnam's a problem because of the virus still is prevalent there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of supply issues that are happening, not just computer chips. We hear about that all the time, computer chips with cars, and things like that. They're finding a hard time.
Building products, everything.
Exactly. And everything now has a chip in it, whether it's a toy or whether it's a car or obviously computers and everything like that. So that's great news that you have inventory. And for other authors out there, APG Sales is a great resource, as you just mentioned. So you have 2 more books coming out next year. Is there a book? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the second one is going to be Energy Wars. It's a middle grade. It's going to be a little bit different than my normal ones. It may be a series, but that book is about, again, it ties into energy and feelings, but it's about a boy who starts seeing fireballs, negative words as fireballs being thrown back and forth at school. And all the kids are throwing them at each other, and he realizes he's in a war. So that book, I've had middle, and it's actually a funny book. It's not a serious one. I've kind of changed it a little bit, but anyways, he tries to figure out why he's seeing this and what it means and what he's going to do about it. And I've had some children read it already from 4th to 6th, and they were saying it's very similar to the babysitting, was it Babysitting Club and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So that was exciting. And they actually, one of them told me that it was the best book she's ever read. She's never read anything like it. So I was pretty excited about that.
Now, you mentioned Wayne Dyer, and that's big too in my life because I meditate a lot, and he has many of those meditations online, and you can find them on YouTube for free and everything like that. Is that something that you think? We used to do that back in grade school. We used to meditate a little bit sometimes, and I found that to be very wonderful, a wonderful thing. You think maybe more of us should do that? Meditate?
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Meditating. I mean, meditating has a different, I think it's gotten a bad, not bad, but probably a misunderstood word People think meditating is you sit like a Buddha for 4 hours, but for me, meditating is not, for me, meditating is walking. So I go for a hike every night, or as often as I can. And I think it's mindfulness. And meditation is really just shutting off your mind. And your mind, I think maybe this is what I'll end up speaking about, but your mind is really just a computer. And people need to realize that the mind is the filter, kind of, this is going to be a little out there, but it's really just a filter and a processor for your energy field to make sense of this dimension, so to speak. So the mind, and the Matrix kind of touched on this in a couple movies and Star Wars, the whole concept of meditating is getting in touch with your higher self. It's shutting the mind off. The mind is designed to create and solve problems. So the mind itself is meant to compute and fix, right? So create, fix, compute. And people get stuck in their minds. Most people don't even realize that they're living in their mind the majority of the time. And when you get to a place where you can shut your mind off and be in that place where you're talking this meditative, and I don't even like the word meditative because it makes it feel like it's quiet, or it's nothing, it's a nothingness, but it's greater than that. It's this place of higher knowing, like you're almost at a higher level, and you can get above this noise of your mind that's constant. And I think that's really what the Buddhist masters and the all of those leaders around that have come throughout history. I mean, even Einstein said that. He always said it wasn't his mind that came up. He didn't solve or come up with these ideas using his mind. He came up with them when he was quiet and his mind was quiet, so it's like there's this higher self, your soul, or whatever you want to call it, that you can access, I think. And so meditation, I mean, that's what I try to write about too, is this ability to recognize your mind. And one of the things I heard, which was great, one of the guys I listened to, and he always says, whenever you think of something, you go, you say, why did I think that? Or why do I feel like that? Who's saying that? Who's asking that question? It's not, it's like, that's your higher self. And when you realize that your mind, you can control your mind, that's where you really learn to master your life. And that's where you learn to be able to manifest whatever you want, because your mind is not always true. It's not always right. It's not always real. It's like your mind's just going to continue to process and solve, think, create, think. Why am I doing this? And it's like, when you could just shut that off, you can start to use your mind to your advantage and you actually control it. So I always like to think of it, your mind is a computer. And if people understood that it's just that, and I'll give you a little background story quick if we have a minute, but I had a severe concussion probably about 7 years ago. And again, I've always started watching Wayne Dyer when I was probably 13. And Esther Hicks, I love her work. Abraham Hicks, any of the higher consciousness stuff. But about 7 years ago, I had hit my head. I had a concussion, and I actually hit my head multiple times because my children were too small to call 911. But one of the things that was when I really started to understand and had the physical experience of my mind being a computer, because my concussion was so bad that I couldn't, everything overstimulated me, the lights, the sounds, anything. And so I started to have to relearn and become aware of these things. It's like my brain had to relearn all the things that happen in autopilot. And this is how we become numb to the present moment, right? When you're washing your hands, you're not thinking about the hot water. Your brain is doing it in the background. When you're driving your car, you're not thinking about pushing the gas or putting your turning signal on. You're kind of doing it in the background. That's what your mind is meant to do. So as I started, I would actually have to just lay down and just close my eyes, and my mind would spin because it was like resetting itself with all the information that it kind of had to reprocess. It was interesting. So I had an actual physical experience of my brain being separate from me. It was bizarre. It was almost like, what the heck? Oh my God, I just got to shut it off. It was like when you get drunk and you're spinning and you're just waiting for that spinning to stop. And my brain would just spin. I'd be like, okay, this is going to pass. This is going to pass. So I had really to learn to become mindful, just to kind of reset myself. But so I think that meditation, I mean, I love that. I wish more kids would understand this, that your mind is not who you are, that your thoughts are not who you are, your feelings are not even who you are. Your feelings are your experience of being human. And if you can learn to master those, if you can learn that they're not happening to you, then you can take control of them, and then you can really find happiness, because you realize that even myself, even now, like I consider myself a master, and I'm like, why am I thinking this? Like, stop. Like, why am I worrying about this? This is so stupid. And you got to just tell your mind, you just got to shut it off.
Yeah.
And that's where meditation is, that practice and introduction to, separating yourself from those two things. And then you can start to merge back into, okay, I can control this. My feelings and my thoughts are not who I am. They're not my identity. They're just what's happening, and I can control them.
Well, I wish your books were available when I was a child, because I certainly could have used them. And I would have a better viewpoint of self-love for myself, because I'm over 60, I'm 61 now. And even to this point, I struggle with that particular part of my life because of what you went through in your childhood. So
Yeah.
like I said, I wish these books were available. I wish we were a little bit more open back in those olden days, as my kids call me now, back in the olden days.
Yeah. Well, I am going to do I'm going to work on an adult title as well once I get through the energy wars. I had one already kind of done. It's called Follow Your Feelings. But I mean, I've been writing, like I said, I started so many books like that, and then people come out with titles and I'm like, oh, that was my book. Like, I had written a book, Being Human Sucks, when I was like 22. And then he came out with the F book. What was that?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
The F Life or something, but
yeah.
But yeah, I think self-love, and that's really my passion, I think, is self-empowerment and self-love. And we all struggle with it, even myself. Like, that's what I mean. I still catch myself like, what, where is this even from?
Yes.
But I think one thing, and this is what I was trying to address earlier about this law of allowing, I think the other piece that people need to realize is that we think it's all us, right? Like, you think your consciousness is all you, right? Like, we think like our childhood made us this. There's a collective consciousness that we're all part of. And half the time we don't even know we're part of it. We think it's us. We're like, well, I'm the one who doesn't love myself. Everybody else does. Or I'm the one who doesn't feel thin enough. Everybody else. No, it's this collective consciousness that we have to fix. And if we could fix it with children, I mean, obviously that's the best place to start, but it's people becoming aware of this idea that, being human is not meant to be, it's 50-50. It's not meant to be this glorious, you're not doing something wrong if you have a bad night's sleep. Like, you get a good night's sleep maybe 5 times a month, and the rest of the time you're not sleeping that well, but that's normal. And we're conditioned to think that something's wrong with us all the time, because we're bombarded, even like the sleep concept, we're bombarded with these messages: perfect night's sleep, buy this mattress, buy this sleep machine, buy this thing, and get an air filter. Like, what the hell? No wonder we don't think, like, nobody knows that right now where you are, everything's okay. And that's it. That's all that matters. And tomorrow, even if you feel like crap when you wake up, you're still okay. That's normal. Like, you're not going to wake up every morning and be like, whoa, it's a party. And some days you will. Like, that's the thing. It's like 50-50. And if somebody taught us when we were kids that half of your life is going to suck and half of it's going to be good, you kind of just go with it. You're like, oh, okay, today I woke up and I'm tired. You don't beat yourself up because you're tired and like make yourself feel like crap because you didn't go to bed on time, you ate bad, you did whatever it is that your mind tells you did wrong. It's not true. If you just woke up and you don't feel good, there's no reason to it. There's no hidden meaning, So
right. Well, that's this is a perfect way to end this podcast, because you just said a lot of wonderful things of information for people to digest. And I'm digesting them right now. I'm thinking, I didn't have a good night's sleep the other night. And I was thinking, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why am I not sleeping perfectly? But as you said, we're taught have a good night's sleep, get this pillow, get this mattress,
Yeah,
get
it's
this,
crazy.
get that. And especially with the pharmaceutical companies, take this, take that, that's
It'll make you feel better. You'll be better. No,
Yeah.
you know what? You're just going to feel bad half the time. Like, let's just accept that it's just reality. And that's the contrast. The thing is the negative and the bad is the contrast for us to recognize when it's good. That's it. So when you have a great night's sleep, if we focused on appreciating the great night's sleep, instead of dwelling on all the bad night sleeps we had, we would be like, oh, I had a great night's sleep last night. It's like switching to gratitude and realizing that when it's good, it's good. It doesn't have to be like that every day. And if it was like that every day, you wouldn't enjoy it anyways. We'd look for a better night's sleep. It's like we
Exactly.
always, so anyways.
Yeah. All right, well, they can find your wonderful books, and I highly recommend these books, especially the 6-book bundle. You can also get the book signed by Jodi, and it's jodidee.com, JODIDEE.com. You can find all these award-winning books, plus you'll get coloring pages, and I recommend them for the adults too, because it's very good. They're very good therapeutic. So Jodi, thank you so much for joining us on Magical Books for Kids. We have
Thank
to have
you.
And when your books come out again next year, we have to have you back.
I would love to.
Yeah, because this session needs to be extended, not just for children, but for adults. I was getting a lot more out of this than ever before.
I know.
So
I know.
congratulations.
I do have a blog. I do have a section on my website for adults too. So it's under
That's great.
self-empowerment.
That's great. I'm glad. I'll be taking a look at that. But I can't wait for the adult book too. So
yeah, I know. I got to get on it. All right, now you're making me do more work. I'm on it. I'll get on it.
All right. We're glad authors have to inspire each other. So Jodi Dee, thank you so much for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids. It is free on all platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Magic Everywhere, INC.com, and YouTube. Join us again for another edition of this free podcast. I'm Michael John Sullivan.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.